Hi there, Panthers fans. This is another edition of the Processing Blue podcast. You are joined by two people who have watched the film Tombstone, Panthers beat reporter Alex Zietlow, and then fellow Panthers beat reporter Mike Kaye. Alex Zietlow actually gets the first introduction because he did his homework, as we expect on the Processing Blue podcast. Alex, how do you do?
Mike, I'm great. I do have a couple Tombstone takeaways if we want to get into them. Just off, but okay. Well, I'll just go straight into it then because I know this is a very big deal to you.
It's a big deal to the audience. Okay, I mean it's a big deal to the audience, the state of North Carolina, the city of Charlotte, the greater NFL. This is like a Springsteen-esque thing for journalists that are born in the 90s. I promise you, this is very big. And I swear, if you crush my dreams with your feedback, I will be very disappointed. Go on.
Well, when you told me that some of our favorite local sports radio guys were asking you about, hey, has Alex watched Tombstone yet? Then I was like, oh, this has become a moment too big. This is not something that I could just avoid the homework on, you know? So I decided to watch it. And to be clear, I feel like there's this perception out there that, oh, Alex doesn't watch movies. He's not into movies. No, Zach can attest. Our wonderful producer, Zach, can attest that I have started my academic movie journey in 2024. It was late in 2024, but I've watched a lot of classics. I'm very much getting into it. I'm learning about the great directors and stuff. And yes, I haven't seen Tombstone, but that's literally the only movie on Mike's letterbox right now. So I don't. So I just wanted to let people know that I'm like.
He had Raiders of the Lost Ark on there too. For the record, the greatest.
Might have that as well because yeah. Okay, just real quick on Tombstone. Predictably.
Wait. Hold on. The movie has been out since before Alex was born, but spoiler alerts. Boom. Go ahead.
Yes, it was a 1993 film. I was born in December 1996. Yes, I just turned 28 years old, if you want to do the math on that. All right. Predictably, Mike, I liked it. In many ways, it is a crowd pleaser of a movie to someone like me for my movie intellect or lack thereof movie intellect. There are clear good guys. There are clear bad guys. You got a hilarious anti-hero in Doc, played by Val Kilmer, who just like every time he opened his mouth, I was giggling. And then, of course, if you wanted to get a fingernail under the surface, you could maybe think about, oh, are the good guys actually all that good? But then you realize, oh, they're better than the alternative because the bad guys, the Cowboys, are actually irredeemably bad people. The performances were cool. Kurt Russell is great, as always. He'll always be, to my generation and to me specifically, he'll always be the head coach of the USA hockey team in the movie Miracle. I know it kind of sounds crazy to you maybe, but
yes,
that is his iconic role to me. Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be thinking about this movie forever, but the thing that I will be thinking about forever, or a couple things I'm going to be thinking about forever, are some Val Kilmer quotes, which I typed up on my notes app right here. Okay, here are a couple. I'm not going to do his voice, but I'm just going to, because I can't replicate his voice, but Johnny, I forgot you were there. You may go now. Forgive me if I don't shake.
Johnny with a great cameo, Billy Bob Thornton, before pre-Angelina Jolie marriage.
Hell yeah. Okay, forgive me, I don't shake hands. That's pretty awesome.
Right now, buddy.
Yes, and Mike's son wants to make a quick cameo. My third favorite one. You are a good woman. Then again, you may be the Antichrist. And then I really like I'm your Huckleberry, which he says twice. And the second time is like super powerful. And you're like, let's go. And then my favorite one, which comes at the very end, he goes, let's finish this. The last charge of Wyatt Earps and his immortals.
The strain.
Ooh.
was more than he could bear is actually something that I say almost weekly in my house. Very good, Alex. I think this was worth all 5 minutes that we spent on this segment. Because frankly, it wasn't worth 5 minutes or really 3 hours of most Panthers fans' time was a just absolute slobber knocker of a beatdown by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield, you might have heard of him, threw for 359 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. Their running game for the Buccaneers went over 200. Surprise! And the Panthers were without 3 notable names in Chuba Hubbard, who was placed on IR at the last minute on Saturday. J.C. Horn, who's battling a hip injury. His status for Week 18 is unclear. And then Josie Jewell, who suffered a concussion last week. Also kind of a last-minute sort of, okay, well, that's interesting. Look, I think when you look at this defense without those 2 names, or even with those 2 names, you knew it was going to be a tough one for this team, especially with the Buccaneers having a top 5 offense. Liam Cohen is smoking. And I think oh man, I'm just so excited, Alex, watch Tombstone. It opens up so many possibilities for humor and references over the next however many years of our partnership. I am now 3 for 3 with getting a beat partner to watch Tombstone late in life, or I guess later in life, and then them enjoying it and saying, Mike, you were right. And if anybody who knows me knows how much I enjoy hearing the phrase, Mike, you were right. But anyway, back to that feathering of the Panthers. Speaking of that, the Ducks are punt returners. Who knew? We'll get back to that Mallard madness in a second. But Alex, what was your biggest takeaway in this game in general, both positive and negative?
Okay, well, let's just start with the negative because I think that's the most pressing. Dude, I knew the Panthers defense was bad.
How bad were they?
They were atrocious, bro. Like that was insane. I don't know. I know if you really want to go back and look, okay, the Eagles could have done this too, but they overthought their play calling. Instead of just giving the ball to Saquon, they tried to work out some kinks in the passing game. The Buccaneers were like, no, we actually have to win this game, so we're just going to feed the ball to this dude named Bucky, and he's gonna run for 1,000,000 yards if required. There did get a point in the first half where I was like, why is Baker Mayfield throwing so much when they're having so much success on the ground? And I was like, but then I just thought it's more efficient to throw the ball because they're gaining 20 yards every pass play as opposed to 10 every run play. It was just remarkable. I know we're going to eventually talk about this. I know we're going to talk about this later in the show, but I have been someone on this podcast and on various other platforms saying that defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero does not deserve to leave at the end of this year. And I still believe that, but man, this was like the biggest counterexample to my point all season. And I understand that the personnel was remarkably down bad, but goodness gracious, this was just really a really rough defensive showing. The Panthers now have given up, and I'll punctuate with this on the negative thing, and then I'll pass it back to you. But the Panthers have given up 496 points on the season. That's most in franchise history, with still 4 more quarters of football to go against a highly motivated Atlanta Falcons team. They are not out of reach yet of the NFL record 533 points allowed in a season, which was that feat was done by the 1981 Baltimore Colts. So there's no way around it. This is a historically bad defense. And I know that the term historically bad sometimes gets thrown around too much, and we use it in a way to hyperbolize some things and to raise the intensity on certain things. But this is a straight fact. This defense has eclipsed history because they've given up so many points. And And I know that's just really general. I don't have like specific points. I mean, the tackling was atrocious. Damani Richardson was really the only reliable tackler, and Xavier Woods were really the two only reliable tacklers on Sunday. I don't know. I don't know where else to go. Mike, do you have? Is there any semblance of positivity on this defense, or are you going to evade that entirely?
Well, definitely not on defense, but I do want to give Bryce Young his some serious praise. He and Adam Thielen have a connection like, well, Mike Kaye and Alex Zietlow. Like they are in tune. They know
Who is who, Mike? Who is who, Mike?
What? We'll get back.
Who is who?
Well, I'm very much probably Adam Thielen just based on age, but because we are the same age. I'm a little bit older actually, but anyway, that's not and you're a little bit older than Bryce, but they make magic together. And I think if Adam Thielen would have played the whole season and Bryce would have played the whole season, Adam Thielen would have another 100 catch, 1,000-yard season. I think that's abundantly clear. That said, Bryce was throwing the ball downfield. Something that he has really improved on over the last month, specifically, is keeping his eyes down the field and just heaving throws. He is playing fearless. He is playing like a point guard. He is putting up those alley-oops, and David Moore and Adam Thielen and even Tommy Tremble are going up and getting it, and I think that is a massively good sign. Remember, last year, he was basically limited to throwing behind the line of scrimmage or throwing within like 5 yards in front of them. And so I think Canales has opened up the passing game. I think he needs to improve his accuracy on intermediate routes. That's always been a thing. But I think from like the standpoint of being able to just chuck it, homeboy is ripping that ball. Like his first his first three throws of the game were just baller. Okay. The first throw to Adam Thielen was an absolute dime. Like, I mean, like audible noises. And then he hit Jalen Coker. I mean, it was a little bit contested, but he just darted it in there. The touchdown throw to Thielen. Then later on, they had another touchdown connection where Thielen split two defenders. Like, man, get yourself a friend who is dependable when you throw him a deep shot as Adam Thielen. Then again, in life, you're probably not throwing a bunch of deep shots, but you should still get that friend. I think that would be beneficial to your lives. Let's get back to the negative, though. Here's the thing, and I've said this before. I think Evero is a good coordinator. I think he is a good defensive coach. The issue is he doesn't really adapt to scheme ever to fit his personnel. And look, I understand Brian Burns is not here. He's doing such great things that, you know, he's playing well, but it's not like he's made a massive impact on the Giants, who are now 13-3. Frankie Luvu has had an incredible year, and he has had an impact in Washington. That's the one that got away, if you ask me. I think they didn't get enough for Brian Burns, but it's reasonable, after watching the season, that he is gone. Dante Jackson has pretty interception numbers, but he's been terrible in coverage for the most part. Pretty much what you're used to in Carolina. Jeremy Chin, Evero didn't even play him, right? Like for weeks. He's actually having a really good year in Washington and proving me wrong as a safety, because to me, he's a will linebacker. That said, Dan Morgan did spend a 3rd-round pick on Trevin Wallace. He did spend a 5th-round pick on Shaw Smith-Wade. He did spend a 6th-round pick on Jaden Crumity. He brought in Jadeveon Clowney. I understand DJ Wadham was injured for half the year, but he has come in and played better. They bring in all of Evero's buddies. Nick Scott, who's been benched. Jordan Fuller, who's been benched. Josie Jewell, who's kind of had an up-and-down year. His stats are pretty, but that first half of the season was rough. And then he came back and was playing lights out. A'Shawn Robinson's really been the one guy who has just been a wagon for this team. He really has just like carried them from a run defensive standpoint. Obviously, one person can't stop the run by themselves. But then again, the excuse keeps being losing Derek Brown was like a huge problem for the run defense. Well, I mean, that's one player. And frankly, they're setting a new low for run defense efficiency. So I don't know if you can really just give them, the pass on that. So it's just like, yes, this defense is not very talented, and they came in paper thin. We said it all offseason. That said, there have been very little adjustments. I think the scheme is fine when you have a lot of talent around. I don't think it's really the type of scheme that can handle, big losses and big spots. And this defense needs help on every single level. And so it's kind of a recipe for disaster. I don't think that's completely Evero's fault, but I do think the lack of adjustment has been kind of frustrating, even as an objective observer to watch. It's just like every week it's the same thing. And I think what was so vividly frightening about this Sunday game is that the pass defense has been middling, at least, right? And then Baker Mayfield lights them up to the tune of 359 and 5 touchdowns. Like, they probably could have thrown for a ton more with Kyle Trask, but Todd Bowles did Canal a solid at the end and was just like, yeah, we don't need 50 points. I just I don't know. So let's get into this. There are a lot of people calling for Evero's job. I don't know that is the slam dunk answer. I do think they need to adjust the scheme. I think there needs to be more hybrid looks. I think there needs to be more man coverage. I think they need to switch stuff up. And if he's a good defensive coordinator, he can adjust. Most defensive coordinators do. Pete Carroll didn't run the same defense the entire time he was in Seattle. Gus Bradley left for Jacksonville. They switched it up a little bit with Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn left. They switched it up with his successors. You've got to adjust. That's the name of the game in the NFL. Everyone knows how to play Evero's system, and everybody knows they're going to run for roughly 175 to 200 yards against this team. That is a fact. That's just become a proven fact. And so, I don't know how you bring back this entire staff as it is. Obviously internally they know who is at fault more than the others. But here's the thing, that bothers me. They are out of position so regularly, and guys are making mental mistakes and not in their gaps. And players will say, well, guys are pressing and trying to do more than they should and doing all this stuff. This is something players say all the time. On record, everybody is saying this. I think eventually technique and know-how fall back on coaching, right? If you're practicing this every week, tackling and run fits are not necessarily a talent-based avenue. So it's well, then how do you hold people accountable? I understand. Again, I think that, Evero went to a steak eating contest with a bunch of dull knives, but you still went. You still showed up, right? Let's get some beef. You know what I mean? This is that's the thing. They played good in spurts. They played really well at the end of that Cardinals game. They played really well against the Giants, but they had not had a complete game. I asked Xavier Woods about it, and he's like, no, we haven't played a complete defensive performance. And to go 16 games, which was the norm as of 4 years ago, and not have a complete performance as a defense, yikeroos, man. This defense is just not good. And what I'll say on top of that is, I know I'm ranting a little bit, and I will close it with this. It is very hard to be an offensive coordinator when you know that the defense is going to give up 60 rushing yards every series. They're probably going to give up 3 to 7 points almost every other series. The clock's going to be drained because they're rushing the ball just at a mighty rate. And Bucky Irving goes from looking like a Winter Soldier to Captain America with his stat line, and you can't stop it. And your chances are shrinking because the clock is running, the points are going up, and your ability to be creative, especially from a complementary standpoint, is just evaporating. You have to throw the ball because you don't, and you have to get the quick game in, because if you don't, you're going to run out of shots, man. That's the whole thing. And so, if I were an offensive-minded head coach and I saw a defense that was, dripping like a spaghetti strainer, I would be like, well, how do I make this better? Not just for me, but for the overall product. It puts special teams in a bind. It puts, the running game in a bind. It is not beneficial. It's also really hard to evaluate anybody when 3 guys are out playing the wrong gap or getting run over or dudes are just I mean, like, this is not, I mean, this is logic. This isn't an opinion. This is logic. And I asked Dave Canales, I was the only beat reporter there in the press, I mean, non-Panthers beat writer, or non-Panthers.com beat writer in the press conference that covers the Panthers regularly. And I was like, how do you call an offense with this type of situation? He's like, well, we got what we got. Well, that doesn't seem like a very positive response or a very, jovial backing. And so I think they're going to have to make some decisions. It would not shock me if Evero wanted to change his scenery just because of the way the last 2 years have gone. He's been passed over for the head coaching job twice. The offense on the opposite side hasn't really helped him out either. They've both averaged under 20 points. It's very hard also to be a defensive coordinator when you're constantly in these struggles of like 20 to 17 late in the fourth quarter. That was the story last year, and it's the shoes on the other foot now. And I maybe it's best for both sides if because Evero, I mean, got a bunch of coaching interviews the last 2 years. If he wants to elevate his name, like, going somewhere else might be the ticket. And so again, ranting here, but let's move on. What did you think of the Ducks' performance at Raymond James Stadium?
Wait, Mike, before we get into that, I don't really have anything else to add. I think, and I don't want to just rehash what we said 2 weeks ago, where it was like, okay, if Evero decides to move on, then he can't necessarily interview for other defensive coordinator jobs while maintaining his own job at the Panthers because ownership can block it. I mean, I'm with you that I don't necessarily think getting rid of Evero is the answer, but I am also with you that something's got to change, and you can't just and you can't blame it all on personnel. However, they are playing with fifth and sixth string inside linebackers.
Sure,
absolutely, they are playing with edge rushers who are quite good, but right behind. But it's a very shallow depth chart. They really need to invest in the edge rusher in the upcoming draft. Like, that's all true. I know that, and I did want to say one last thing about, you mentioned how difficult it is to be a play caller offensively when the defense is so bad. I will say the second and third possessions that the Panthers had were 2 3-and-outs, and none of them were designed runs. And this was when the game was within reach. It was and it's not like Raheem Blackshear wasn't running the ball super. I mean, he was no Chuba Hubbard, obviously, but like I think 6 yards his first carry, 3 is.
No, he had 3 carries. He had 3 carries for like 7 yards his first 3 carries. I was tracking.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. But like, you can't get away from that completely. Of course, in that second series, Bryce Young steps up beautifully in the pocket, is confident, is on the run, and throws what I thought on instant replay is just a beautiful ball, a scramble ball, that if Xavier Legette tracks the ball properly, it's a touchdown. And Xavier just somehow they don't connect. And Bryce, like, if you look at Bryce's face, like, after that play, he's like, dang, how did that not work out? So there are like small things like that, and if they would have connected there, that would have changed my perception on the play calling stuff too. But yeah, when the game is close like that, you still got to run the ball. That said, play calling is brutal when you are just knowing, okay, we're gonna give up 20 points in the first half. It just is. Also, I also did want to mention Bryce got pressured on 66% of his dropouts, or more than 66% of his dropouts, and dropbacks, and he still played pretty well. So that's good.
Yeah, there's a massive drop off between Taylor Moton and Josh Nijman. That's abundantly clear. But you still answer my question, as I'm looking at StreamYard and their emblem is a duck. Thanks for the reminder, StreamYard. What did you think of the Mallards' performance?
Well, the Mallard did great things for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Literally, the one time he was on the field led to a punt block and a touchdown for the Bucks. I do just want to put this out there. So I don't know how you feel about the Daffy Duck versus Donald Duck conversation. I'm very much a Donald Duck guy. Okay, I'm very much a Donald Duck guy. Not that I'm anti-Daffy, but I just think it's so funny. Well, firstly, Donald is quite iconic. But secondly, I just think it's so funny that when Donald Duck goes to the beach, he wears swim trunks. Okay? In real life, he only wears a shirt, like a sailor shirt. So, like, what are we doing? Like, what Donald, like, what are you... I mean, I know this is a G-rated show, but like, what? I don't understand that clothing choice. What's the appropriate thing? Like, what makes you fully clothed? Is it the T-shirt or is it the swimming trunks? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, that is like a really interesting. I think that's like a very like. So I used to watch the show Boardwalk Empire, and it takes place in the 1920s, and like it's on the Jersey Shore, and I remember there's like a scene where a woman gets like basically, yelled at for wearing like what now would be considered like the most prude looking beach outfit you've ever seen. And so like maybe it's the thought process of when Donald was conceived, like that they just went with that. I'm a Daffy guy. I like Looney Tunes, but I will tell you that I have I've kind of, web-footed my way over to the Disney side because of my sons and their affinity for Mickey Mouse. And so I'm kind of like indifferent, I guess. I mean, I was a Daffy guy growing up, but I think that's not surprising to anybody who is listening to this podcast. Let's move on. So T. Higgins took my soul the other night. I was very bored at a sports bar in Tampa, and I was by myself, and I'd order wings, and I was very hungry, and I was trying to distract myself. Hold on, before you get in, Alex, I want to just set this up. I was watching the Bengals play the Broncos, and I understand in the Carolinas, if a guy from Clemson or a guy from South Carolina or a guy from UNC is very good, he's not only very good, he's great. And in a poorly worded tweet, I said, I like T. Higgins, but I don't see the number one wide receiver appeal and the market price. What I meant to say, and why that was confusing, words matter. I poorly worded that, was to say that him being the number one wide receiver on the market and getting equal value for that, I just don't think is prudent. Him being the number one wide receiver is feasible, but it is a projection. He's never really had to be the number one guy over a long period of time. There were concerns about him coming out of college in that instance. That's why he fell to the second round. Jamar Chase is very, very good, and he gets a ton of targets. But I've also covered the Eagles and seen Devontae Smith get a ton of targets, even though A.J. Brown is basically a one-man vacuum with the football. To me, T. Higgins is in that Devontae Smith category where he's a 1B guy. Like, yes, he is a top 15 to 20 wide receiver in the league. There's no question about that. But there are, in my opinion, 10 to 12 number one wide receivers in this league that are true, just like game changers, kingmakers. Like A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, DeAndre Hopkins back 3 or 4 years ago. Those guys are QB makers. Like, they literally make the QB that much better. T. Higgins is a very good wide receiver. And then he went and had the game of his life against the Broncos. Then again, he was going up against the number 2 corner the entire game. But anyway, Alex, go ahead. Weigh in. What's your take on T. Higgins?
Well, before I get on T. Higgins, I was just going to say, you weren't at a sports bar, bro. You were at an Outback Steakhouse.
No, that was Sunday night when I had to listen. I went to what's called the Brick House Tavern that was right next to my hotel in Tampa. It's actually really great wings, by the way. That I hadn't eaten all day.
Okay, okay.
Ooh, the tea on tea. Ooh, I like that, Zach. I'm gonna give you one of these. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm glad we figured that out. No, I mean, Mike, I agree with you. The Panthers are not in a place to invest all of their free agency resources on a wide receiver. They really need to fix his defense, man. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, I don't know how you could watch Sunday's game and say, "Yep, a wide receiver will fix this." Sorry, go ahead.
It's not possible. I will say though, I was much higher on this receiving core before yesterday, if only because I was Xavier Legette struggled, I think is a very fair way to say it. He is a rookie, and he can figure this out. I know he's also battling some injuries, whether that be his groin that he told us about, or this aggravated wrist thing that's been a thing since the Saints that he finally made it on the injury report for this past week. But, without Deontay Johnson, they need someone to fill that X spot, and they put in Xavier, and he isn't doing what Deontay was doing. If Adam Thielen is your best deep threat, like Adam Thielen is a great receiver. He's proven it, and he can catch the deep ball, and he's reliable and all these things. But if he's your deep threat, then I mean, you're not going to have a remarkably explosive offense. That's but at the same time, is it worth going to T. Higgins and giving away what, like a crap ton of draft picks to the Bengals for him when you really need those draft picks to build this?
You're saying if he gets franchise tagged, you're saying?
Oh, yes. Excuse me. And so I guess expending a lot of money. Yes, you're right. Sorry. You wouldn't be trading for him unless you got franchise tag because he's going to be a free agent. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that either way it's smart and either way it's prudent. Yeah, I guess I'm with you. You got to invest in this defense. I can keep droning on, but that's essentially what I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I wrote this in the newsletter. I think if there was a veteran wide receiver that they should go after, it would be DK Metcalf. He's in the final year of his contract. He's worth $18 million. He probably wants a contract extension. And oh, by the way, he hasn't gotten one yet. Seattle has a new coaching staff. There could be some, they're on the cusp of missing the playoffs. So that could be a thing too. And oh, by the way, there's $7 million over the cap as well, according to Over the Cap. So maybe there's an avenue there. We know that John Schneider and Dan Morgan are close friends. We know that they're willing to make a deal. We saw that with Mike Jackson, which has turned out to be a huge trade for this team, especially by snap count. And, guess what? His passing game coordinator for his first 2 years, Dave Canales. His wide receivers coach for the first 3 years, Nate Carroll. Brad Isaac was on that staff. So there's a lot of familiarity there. You know what you're getting in him. You know how to use him. He is a traditional X receiver. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. He's got 3,000-yard seasons. Like, he's a dog. And he's a dog, right? I think with T. Higgins, there's a lot of projecting. And with Metcalf, while, again, I'd probably put Metcalf in that same category of, like, the 1B, but he's probably at the top of that 1B group. I don't know. I think Garrett Wilson's going to be way too expensive. I don't think there's a world that exists where the Jets don't ask for a top 10 pick for him and more. So I see a lot of people like trade for Garrett Wilson and then also draft Abdul Carter in the first round. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I think if they avoid veterans in free agency or trade, they'll look at the top 10 where there's a few different wide receivers who are getting projected in there. And potentially that could be the future. Drafting in the top 10 at wide receiver is very different than waiting till the top 30 to 40 picks, which they've done the last 3 of the last 4 years, to take a wide receiver. So there's a game still this weekend. And on that note, Atlanta has to win. If they win, they also need to hope that they get some help from the New Orleans Saints. Good luck with that. I think that Tampa Bay and Atlanta will both win this upcoming weekend, and if that's the case, the Bucs will go to the playoffs, and the Falcons will join the Panthers in Bermuda or wherever they're traveling to in the offseason. Alex, are we on the same page here?
We are on the same page. I felt so wronged when Chuba Hubbard went on IR, and my newsletter had already gone that that I was choosing the Panthers. So now Scott and I are locked up going into week 18. I think it would be we have to choose different results, right?
Yeah. So here's what I'd like to do, okay?
And
I'd like for you both to send your predictions to me separately, and then I will give them to you when you set up the newsletter.
okay.
So that way I have seen it, I have blessed it, and then you guys that way you guys don't have to feel like it's forced or whatever. I mean, I think you would both pick the Falcons, but the tiebreaker
is the score. Yep.
Is the score. So, as the biggest loser, I will oversee this.
Okay. Sounds good. Appreciate you, Mike.
Shout out to T. Higgins. Anyway, Alex, let's take this one home.
Yeah, if we don't have anything else to say about ahead of this Falcons game, which I really don't think we do,
I would just say in vino veritas, and wine is the truth, and stuff like that's just my type of game, or Kate, you're not wearing a bustle, how lewd, or well, bye. Dang, that's how that I should have. That should have been my. That's a wrap, Zach. Okay. Well, whatever. We'll reset. Go ahead, Alex. Send us home.
We're doing it live. Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to CharlotteObserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, Mike. Stay creative and keep processing.
Zach, well, bye.